with the Delta variant and COVID rising, even here in the Bay Area, where we're 90% vaccinated for those who are over 12. We're taking Thursday night Bible study at least for the next month or so until we can see. We're going to take it back online only, no in person. We're still doing in person worship, still doing in person Sunday school on Sunday mornings. But Thursday night Bible study is going back to digital only, at least for the next month, so we can see what happens to hospitalizations, especially and also illnesses among children as school starts back. School started today for the high school crowd and for many of the elementary schools, not in Burlingame. In Burlingame, the elementary schools don't start for another couple of weeks. But so that's just by way of explanation of why and how I am doing the 10-minute Bible study preview again tonight. Don't know who's going to join online, if anybody, but everybody's welcome. That's at 7 o'clock. We do this by Zoom. But for now, we got a 10-minute preview Bible study. I got some interesting stuff for you. The parable of the mustard seed and the parable of the yeast, they go together. Very short passage, just a handful of verses. And they mean what you think they do, but they mean so much more. I actually learned some stuff from the commentary today. So Matthew chapter 13, verse 31 is where we're starting. He, Jesus, told them another parable. Oh, by the way, I'll put the Zoom link in the comments immediately upon completion of this so that if you want to join, you can. Jesus told them another parable. So this is in a section of parables about the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven. He said this, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. And though it is the smallest of seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so the birds come and perch in its branches. Amazing, right? He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour. Think about that. 60 pounds of flour. Wow. And she took that, the flour and the yeast, and worked it all through the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He didn't say anything to them without using a parable. In other words, nothing was straightforward. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. This is a quote from one of the Psalms. I will open my mouth in parables, and I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. That's from Psalm 78, verse 2. Now, there's a couple of things I want you to know. Number one, this passage is using hyperbole. The mustard seed is a small seed, but it is not the smallest of seeds. I don't think that's really relevant. I don't think that really matters, other than just to point out that that's not the point. The bush that grows up from the mustard seed is really, it's a bush. It's not a huge tree. And in fact, birds don't perch in it. So there's a bit of irony in what Jesus is saying here. It is, and it makes you wonder then, why does he say it this way? And what's his point? And, was he winking when he said it? Is it a little bit tongue in cheek? And I don't want to quite go that far. I do think the parable means what you've probably always thought, that the kingdom of God often starts with small things that appear insignificant and then becomes much more important, much more significant. I think that is an aspect of the teaching here. But because the mustard seed isn't actually the smallest of seeds, and because the bush that grows from it isn't actually that big and doesn't actually act as a great nesting area, I think that we have to assume that there is that there's at least some other point. And I'd encourage you to think about what that might be. And let me get to the yeast one for a second, because they go together. They're told right back to back. So something you may not know is that yeast is a common euphemism in the ancient world for corruption. And so, and And it's not just that she puts the yeast in the dough, but the actual Greek is that she hides the yeast in the dough. So she hides the corruption in the dough, which is 60 pounds, or sorry, in the, what is it? In the, where are we? She hides, she hides the corruption or the yeast in 60 pounds of flour. That is a lot of flour. That is enough to feed an army. It's enough to, maybe even feed an entire city. And so there's something interesting going on here as well. And it's not just that something small becomes something big. It's that a small thing that corrupts, it's the kingdom of heaven is like a small thing that corrupts something that becomes big. It's corruption may not be the right word. And as I was thinking about it, I think these parables are teaching a similar thing. So there is a movement within Christianity to think about Christianity, especially where there are not a lot of Christians, as something subversive. We're subverting the evil ways of the world. We're subverting the normal values, right? Like, the stronger you are, the more powerful you are, the more wealthy you are. We Christians subvert that, right? Instead of cursed are the poor, we say blessed are the poor. Instead of pitied are the mourned, we comfort the mourning. Instead of, persecuted are the righteous, we celebrate the righteous. There's that kind of, they're not seen as naive. And so there's a subversion going on there. And I think this parable is talking about that a little bit of subversive yeast can infect an entire community. And I think that's part of the hope of the kingdom of God, that a little bit of yeast, a little bit of that which is subverting things can actually, hidden within, it doesn't even have to be completely visible. We don't have to be the ones on stage. We don't have to be the ones, holding power, but we can still have a huge impact on the community. And you see this all the time. Tiny little churches, even like ours, 100 people on Sundays, that's pre-COVID. 150 people on Sundays. And yet we impact hundreds, if not thousands of people every week. Before the pandemic, I think we had 9 or 10 different 12-step meetings trying to help people get sober who aren't even part of our church. But these meetings had everywhere from 10 to 20 to sometimes 30 people at the meetings. So if you think about that, that's 200 to 300 people just in the 12-step meetings, not counting our Sunday worship, not counting the kids programs, not counting the families that those kids are connected to in the way that we interact in the community. So a small thing that is subverting the corrupted values of the world, like we're corrupting the corruption, can have a big impact. And then if I go back to the previous parable, I think that it is saying that small things, God can use small things and grow them into big things in the kingdom. But I also think that the bush that isn't as big as Jesus is sort of nod, wink, winking, I think he's also saying that maybe the kingdom isn't always exactly what we expect. And that it comes often in more humble ways than we think. And so I think those would be great things to talk about this evening. I'm curious what you think, learning that yeast was a common euphemism for corruption, and learning a little bit of truth about the size of the mustard seed, and more importantly, the size of the bush, and why you think Jesus spoke like that, what he meant, and what it means to you. So hope this has been interesting. If you have questions, feel free to message me, leave them in the comments, or join us on the Zoom. I don't know. It could be just me and you. Who knows? But that will be coming up at 7. And I'm going to shut this down right now and go get the Zoom ID and password and put them in the comments so you can join if you like. God bless. Have a great evening.